The most common and most inexpensive way to host a WordPress site on the web is through shared hosting. Getting web space on a shared hosting server is a little like renting a hotel room or an apartment. It's cheap and flexible, but you may run into trouble with the neighbors, and price often reflects service and location. When you get a shared hosting plan, you're allotted a predefined volume of hard drive space on the server. In addition, you're allowed to use a certain amount of RAM, processing power, and in and out traffic on that server. The space, RAM, processing power, and traffic is shared among the different people and companies who rent space on this server. That means if you're lucky and you're placed in a good part of town with polite neighbors, you won't have any trouble with your site. On the other hand, if you're placed in a bad part of town where the neighbors, or more precisely their websites, are large, poorly maintained, or are extremely popular, their bad management or hogging of resources will negatively impact the performance of your site. Don't let this dissuade you from using shared hosting though. For most sites, a mid to high level shared hosting account with any of the more reputable shared hosting providers will be more than enough. And if you run into trouble along the way, you can either ask the host to move you to a new server or upgrade to a better plan. To install and run WordPress on a shared host, you need a couple of key components. First off, you need a shared hosting account and access to that account. Most large web hosts sell shared hosting accounts on a monthly or yearly basis, and once you set that account up, you will get full access to the management area of your account. You also need a domain name pointing to the shared hosting account. Normally, when you set up a shared hosting account, you will get one free domain name with it, and that domain name will automatically point to the right place. But if you have an existing domain name with a different host, you can also point that domain name into your host. If you need help with that, contact your domain name provider and your shared hosting provider. You also need WordPress itself, and later in this course, we'll look at how to download WordPress and then how to upload it to your host. You'll need an FTP client application so that you can do the transfer of WordPress from your computer to your host. And finally, you'll need a text editor so you can edit some of the key files inside WordPress. WordPress is a free open source application that you can download from the web. You can also find free open source FTP client applications for your system, as well as free open source text editors for your system on the web. With all these components in place and a solid internet connection, you are ready to get started. A WordPress site consists of two main elements: the files that constitute WordPress and the database that serves up the content. The first step in setting up a WordPress site is to create a database for WordPress to interact with. The database is created using an automated tool on your web host admin panel. But before I set up the database, I've created this file here on my desktop that has an entry for database name, database host name, username, and password. I'm going to save this information in this text file so that later, when we configure WordPress, it'll be able to talk to the database. Depending on what shared web host you are using, the experience of logging in will be dramatically different. Here you see the login area for .easy, and here you see the login area for one-on-one. As you can see, completely different experiences, but hidden within these experiences, you will find the same type of information. In this case, what we want to do is create a new MySQL database. And if you scroll down here, you'll see on one-on-one, you have something called MySQL administration. Under .easy, you instead have something called Site Admin Panel, or cPanel. And this is a very common thing to find on web hosts. I'm going to use .easy for this demo, so I'm going to follow the link to the Site Admin Panel and also close down one-on-one. And here I land on cPanel. Now, cPanel is a very common tool used by web hosts for management of websites. Here you'll find management of things like your email, your files, and also your databases. The appearance of cPanel will vary greatly depending on the host you're using, and the functions available in cPanel will also vary greatly. So depending on what host you're using, the experience might be different, but the key components will always be there. In particular, MySQL management. So when I scroll down here, you see under databases, we have MySQL databases, which shows me all my databases. And I also have MySQL database wizard. And that's what I'm going to be using now. The only step in creating a database is to give the database a name. So here I'm going to give this database the name testwp. And you also notice that in the case of this host, any database name is prefixed with my username. So here I have my username. I have to copy that and paste it in, and then also copy out the name I gave it and paste that in. And then I click Next Step. Now the wizard has created a new database for me called pinkandY_testwp. And the next step is for me to create a database user. The database user will become WordPress so that WordPress can access the database and put info into the database and also extract information out of the database. So here I'm going to give the user the same name as the database itself, because that makes it easy to remember. And then I can go back to my text file here and copy out the name and paste it in under username. And then I have to give it a password. Now, this is not a regular password like the ones you would set up on your own site that you have to remember. This is a password that will be remembered by WordPress. And it's also a password that any hacker would want to hack. So it's important to create a very strong password. So instead of typing in your own password, I recommend using the password generator. This will generate an extremely strong password for you, like this one, that you can now copy out, paste in down here, then check I have copied this password in a safe place, and click Use Password. Now you have a very strong password and a username that are associated with the new database, and you can click Create User. Now that the username with the password has been connected to the database you created, you need to give this user privileges. This means what the user can do on the database. And because the user is WordPress, you need to give it all privileges. When everything is checked, you click Next Step, and the user and the database have now been created. WordPress is a free open source web publishing application, meaning you can download it for free as many times as you want and use it whenever you want in any way you like. WordPress, the application, can be downloaded from wordpress.org. When you set up a new WordPress site, it is always my recommendation to download a fresh, new and untouched version of WordPress. That way, you get the latest version and you know it has not been edited in any way. To get WordPress, you go to wordpress.org and click either the download button up here in the right-hand corner or follow the download link down here in the front page. This takes you to the download page for WordPress, and from here you can either download the current version of WordPress, or you can go to the release archive and download older versions of WordPress if you want to do backwards compatibility testing. But if you're setting up a new site, you should always click download the latest version of WordPress. And once you click it, it gets downloaded onto your computer. Now that WordPress has been downloaded onto my computer, I can open the zipped archive that came onto my computer, and in the zipped archive, you will find a single folder called WordPress. So I'm going to place that folder on my desktop. And once it's extracted onto my desktop, I can open the application. This is what WordPress looks like out of the box, and this is also what WordPress will look like when it's installed on your computer. You have 3 folders called WP Admin, WP Content, and WP Includes, and then a series of other PHP files that are usually prefixed with WP. If you see this, you know you're working with WordPress. Now that we have WordPress downloaded and extracted onto our computer, the next step is to upload it to the server, and that's next. To get WordPress from your computer onto the web host, you need to connect and upload all the files. This can be done in several different ways, but the easiest method is through FTP. FTP, or File Transfer Protocol, is an old and simple way of transferring files over the web. It is not the most secure way, and for this reason, many shared hosting providers now make you use SFTP, which is a more secure and encrypted method. Both FTP and SFTP work the same way for you as a user. When you signed up for your hosting account, you would have gotten an email from your web host with your FTP account information. If you can't find that, you can log into your management panel and find the FTP information there through cPanel or through your FTP management, or you can contact your web host directly to get the FTP information. Once you have the FTP domain, username, and password, you can connect to your domain using an FTP client. I like to use a client called FileZilla. You can get FileZilla both for Windows computers and for Mac, and it works the same way for both applications. Now I need to log in to my domain. I'm going to show you what happens when you log into the root of your domain first. So I'm going to type in my domain, and then my username, and my password, and click Quick Connect. Now you see I am logged in. It's all green up here in the status area, and the status is currently directory listing successful. And here you see the root of my hosting account. And this can be really confusing for people who log in for the first time. After all, what is all this .cpanel, .gnome, .htp, all this weird stuff here? Well, this is all the stuff that the hosting provider put into your web hosting space to make your web hosting work. The only thing that matters to you is this folder called public_HTML. So if you see all these folders when you log in, you want to go directly to public_HTML because this is where all the live content on your site is going to appear. Now, because I have a web host with a lot of content in it already, you see lots of folders here. And that can be a little bit confusing for you. So instead, I'm going to log in as a separate user and go straight to the folder I want to use. I'm going to break my connection, and then I'm going to change the username to a different FTP account I created to point specifically to a specific folder within my hosting provider. Now, if you're just setting up the first site you've ever set up on your hosting provider, going to public_HTML is good. If you are setting up WordPress under a separate folder like I am, you need to log into that specific folder. Once you're logged in to the correct folder, you're ready to upload WordPress into your hosting account. Now that we have an FTP connection to the web host, it's time to upload WordPress to the server. Here you have to think about where you want WordPress to appear. Like I said in the previous movie, if this is the first time you're setting up a site on your new hosting account, simply go to public_HTML and place WordPress there. However, if like me, you have multiple domains pointing into your account and you want each of these domains to have their own folder, you create a set of folders under your FTP account, and then you point your domains to those folders, and then you host WordPress within those folders. So in my case, what I've done is I've set up a separate folder under public_HTML, and I've called it Theme Weekend, and I pointed the Theme Weekend domain to that folder. So now when I log in using this username and password, I land directly inside that folder, and this is where I'm going to place WordPress. Now all I have to do is open my WordPress folder that I downloaded onto my computer and grab all the folders and files within the WordPress folder and pull them over into the FTP application. Now each of the files and folders are uploaded into my hosting account, and once the upload is complete, I'll be able to activate WordPress. Once the transfer of the files and folders is complete, I need to check failed transfers to make sure that all the files were transferred correctly. If I have any files listed here, I need to grab those files and re-upload them in so I know that all the files and folders were transferred correctly. And then I'm ready to start running WordPress on my server. Now that I've successfully uploaded WordPress into the correct folder on my web host, it's time to visit WordPress for the first time. I'll open my browser and go to the correct domain name. And if everything worked correctly, I should land on this page where it says, there doesn't seem to be a wp-config.php file. I need this before we can get started. This is the configuration file WordPress needs to talk to the database. This happens because WordPress currently has no way of knowing what database it's supposed to be talking to, because we haven't created a configuration file yet. But we don't have to create that configuration file. WordPress can do it for us. To make that happen, simply click on Create a Configuration File. Here you land on the first page for WordPress and it tells you what you need. You need your database name, your database username and password, and also the database host and a table prefix. And you'll remember, previously in the course, we collected most of this information. Your database name, your username and password, and we can make an educated guess about the database host name, and you'll see that in a second. I know I have all the information I need, so I'm going to click on Let's Go and get started. Here I get a form where I need to enter the information I've collected previously. So here I need my database name, so I'll copy that and paste it. And you'll remember I created a database user with the same name, so I'll paste that too. Then I need my complicated password, so I'll go back, copy out the password, paste it in, and then for almost every host, the database host name will simply be localhost. If it's not, you'll likely be told by your hosting provider. Or if you can't find that information, you can contact the hosting provider and ask them what the database host is. Finally, you need to set a table prefix. Now, this is the prefix that will be appended to all the database tables that WordPress is going to use. By default, it's set to WP_, but it's a good idea to change this because if a hacker were to get into the database, they would look for tables that start with WP_. So simply changing it to something else will make it much harder to hack the site. So I'm going to change this to Morten_ and click Submit. Now one of two things will happen. Either you get this message, all right, Sparky, you made it through this part of the installation. WordPress can now communicate with your database. If you're ready, time now to run the install. That means everything worked properly. If so, you're ready to move on to the next movie. If you don't get this message and you get a message saying something is wrong, you should first go back and try to re-enter the information and see if you just got something wrong. And if that doesn't happen, you can go to the movie in this course called Connecting WordPress and the Server Manually and do a manual connection between WordPress and the server. Once the connection has been made between WordPress and the database, you land on this page, and from here you can run the install. This is what's called the famous 5-minute install from WordPress. And here you set up all the information about your WordPress installation. Here you give your site the title, you set up a username and password for yourself, and you also provide an email address so that WordPress can send you emails and remind you of the password. The first thing I'm going to do here is set up a site title, and this is going to be a demo site, so I'll just call it demo site. It doesn't really matter what you put here because you can change it once you get into WordPress itself. The next option is to set a username, and the suggested username here is admin. Admin is not a username you ever want to use in WordPress because anyone who wants to hack your site, the first username they're going to use is admin. So change this to something else. It can be anything except admin. I'm simply going to change it to my name, and that will be more than good enough. Then you have to set a password, and this is going to be a password you need to remember so that you can log in later. And you have to set it twice. And then you have to set your email. And here it's important that you use an email address that actually works because this is the email that will be used by WordPress to send you your password if you forget it. The final option here, under privacy, allows you to choose whether or not you want search engines to index your site. Now, if this is a new site that you're just setting up and you're going to be experimenting with it, I highly recommend turning this option off. Otherwise, Google and Bing will start indexing the content on your site before your site is ready. So it's better to turn the privacy option off and then turn it back on again once you have all your content ready and your site is ready to be viewed by the public. Once you have all the information set up, click Install WordPress. The installation runs, and now you can log into your site by clicking Login. Here you have to enter your username and your password and click Login. And here you have WordPress. If you see this, it means that everything worked the way it was supposed to. If you don't see this and you see either a blank page or an error page, it means that something went wrong in your installation. In that case, the easiest thing to do is simply delete WordPress completely from your server, upload it again, and follow the same procedure one more time. If you've been following this course from the beginning, you followed every step and everything worked correctly, you will now find yourself on the dashboard of your new live WordPress site on your shared hosting account. But this doesn't really look like a website. This looks more like an administration area, and that's exactly what it is. When you logged in after doing the 5-minute install, you logged into the back end or dashboard of your WordPress site. To see what your WordPress site looks like for the public, you need to go to the top left-hand corner, find the site name for your site, and click on it. This will take you to the front end of your website. So this is what the web-using public will see when they visit your site. Now, if you logged yourself out, I'll show you how to get back into the back end of your site. So I'm going to log myself out, go back to my site, and this is what I see if I visit the domain, but I'm not logged in. Now you may notice there's no login button here. So how do I get to the back end of my site again? Well, all I have to do is go to the address bar, find the URL for my site, and then type in /wp-admin. This takes me to the login panel for WordPress, and from here, I type in my username and my password, and click login, and I get back to the WordPress dashboard. This is where you'll do all your work with WordPress, and this is where the real fun begins. In most cases, WordPress is able to create a configuration file for you, and you're able to connect to the database simply by using the web tool that comes with WordPress. But in some cases, when you create a new configuration file, you either get an error message saying error establishing a database connection. In this case, it means that your information is incorrect. So either your database name, your username, your password, or your database host information is incorrect. In that case, you need to check this information again with your host to make sure it's correct and try to submit the form again. In some other cases though, WordPress will tell you that it can't create a new configuration file. That might be because WordPress doesn't have access to that functionality, or if your database host is preventing WordPress from doing so. If that's the case, you need to create that configuration file yourself. It's actually very easy, so let me walk you through that process. First, you need to make sure you have all your components. You have the latest version of WordPress that you downloaded from wordpress.org. You also have a connection directly to your web host, and you have this information that you collected when you created your database. So your database name, your username, and your password. Now you need to go to WordPress, the version you downloaded, and find the file called wp-config-sample, and open this file in your text editor. So I'm going to open it in Notepad++. This is the configuration file that WordPress was trying to create. And all you have to do here is enter the information that WordPress was not able to enter for you. So if you scroll down on this page, you find the information you need to enter right here. Database name, database user, database password, and database host. So here I can simply go and find that information. Here's my database name. So I'll paste that in as database name. I'll also paste in the username because it's the same one. I'll paste in my password. And I already know that localhost is the correct hosting name for this site. There's one more thing you need to do. If you scroll a little further down, you'll find this area, authentication, unique keys and salts. Here you can put in authentication keys to make sure that no one is able to do nefarious things with your site. Now, of course, you can go in and put your unique phrases here, but it's kind of tedious. So instead, WordPress actually comes with a link that will help you do that automatically. So copy out that link, go to your browser and open the link. And here you get an automated set of highly encrypted salt keys. So I'm going to highlight them all, copy them, and go in and just replace the empty ones with the ones that were generated. Now I have extremely complicated encryption keys, and I have all the database information I need to connect to my database. So now I need to save this file. So I'll go to Save As, and save this file as wp-config. Click Save. Then I need to go back to my WordPress installation, which now has the new file, and then to my FTP application, find where WordPress is installed, and drag and drop wp-config into the root of my site. Now WordPress has the configuration file it needs to connect. So now I can go back to the root domain and visit the site. And if everything worked properly, I should either land back here on the installation page, or if I've already set up the database and the connection just broke, I should land right back on the main website.